Welcome to the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals New and Improved podcast series featuring great discussions, insight, and resources on all things related to education and administration. Welcome back to the MASSP podcast. Today, we are talking about human resources and an end-of-the-year checklist. And I have with me today Carol Baaki-Diglio, who is working with MASSP right now. And Carol, tell us who you are, what your experiences are, how you came up with this checklist. Give us a little background on who you are and what you do.
Hi, Theresa. I am currently retired. I just retired from public education in October. I spent 28 years, I bought some years, so that's how I was able to get out at 30. I started my career in Houston, Texas, where I taught 6th through 8th graders. I did 2 years with alternative ed students back here in Michigan, in Livonia, Michigan. Then I taught for 8 more years and then spent my last 15 years in administration. So as a dean, an assistant principal, a principal, all at the high school level, and then spent the last 4.5 years as the assistant superintendent of human resources.
Wonderful. Thank you for your service and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Although it's not like you're taking a whole lot of
Nope.
Your time because you jumped right back in.
That's right.
With MASSP and helping out all of the current leaders and admin, and talk a little bit about what you do and how you support admin through MASSP.
So I am really fortunate to have the connection with MASSP, and I'm happy to be working with the organization because I'm going to be able to bring in kind of the practical side of administration. Some of the things that you don't necessarily get in school or through your administration classes or your leadership classes. And really, through my own experience, once you get in the administrative chair, people expect you to know how to do it on the fly. And so I want to be that support person that you can turn to and ask for that support in the practical side of how to do those things that are not in a textbook. You really learn by doing. And since I have over 15 years of experience in administration, I want to share that and support new administrators or administrators that have been there for a while but haven't had that experience yet. So that's kind of my hope.
I think there are a lot of people listening who will be able to connect to that. Not learning, the baptism by fire type
right.
Feeling that you hit the ground running and go. And I know there are, we spoke just before we started the podcast about, the last few days you have those conversations with your colleagues and say, I wasn't trained for this. And it
right.
just, sometimes we need somebody to be able to give us a heads up of what could possibly come so that we're ready for it.
And one of my biggest fears is we all know there's a national teacher shortage right now, and that's just a symptom of a national administrative shortage. And so if I can do anything to help stop the bleeding, I'd like to do that. I'd like to be that support person. So here I am.
Thank you. So you have created for us an end of the year checklist review, and we are going to do this in kind of a rapid fire format. So I will give you one of the topics that are on your checklist, and you're going to give us just a quick, just a little description of what it is and what we need to be looking for. And then in that, I'd like you to kind of identify which one you feel like the principals struggle the most with, the principals that you've worked with, or that when you were a principal, the ones that you worked with. So we'll get started. First thing on your checklist is staffing and scheduling.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is really an all-year project. I mean, once things get rolling at the secondary level and you're done scrambling to get kids with a full schedule, late September, October, sometimes you're still trying to work through that. You get a little breathing room, and then by January, you're looking at course catalogs and what classes are going to stay, what aren't going to make it. So this is really, to me, a 6-month project. But by this time in the spring, you've already should have scheduled your kids so that you know what classes they have picked. But from an HR perspective, that weeding out of your schedule really is the part where you have to start looking at staffing. And gone are the days where you can kind of run a small class to keep a full FTE for a teacher. Those days are kind of gone now. So this part is tricky because you're looking at everyone's endorsements and can someone teach more than one subject so that you can make a full FTE? And unfortunately, sometimes you have to lay people off. So this part is so critical when you are looking at the big picture of what your staff is going to look like into the following year. And this is really, a lot of people don't know, educators are always living into the next year. So this part of the school year is tricky because you are wrapping up this school year and you are living into the next. And scheduling and staffing is really that part where the two are crashing together and is critical for the rest of your school year months.
Perfect. How about hiring?
So based on how your schedule plays out, and do you hear any murmuring about retirements? Do you hear any murmuring about resignations? Do you hear any requests that someone might be transferring? So when your ears are to the kind of the ground on that as an administrator, and then based on your schedule, who are you going to have to hire? And again, gone are the days where you can kind of hire throughout the spring. To me, you should really know who you're going to be hiring by late March. Job fairs all occur in the first week of April. I'm a big proponent of job fairs, even if you're not hiring, because it gives back to the profession and it gets you in front of potential candidates for the future. So making sure that you have your posts up, making sure that you have the correct credentials and endorsements in that, and then really scheduling out what it's going to look like for screening, pre-screening, interview panels, who do you want sitting in those panels, and then making your recommendations to HR. Because once it goes to HR as a recommendation, that's another whole job that has to be done. Now we're looking at fingerprinting and credential background checks, all of that. So those two go really hand in hand, the staffing and then hiring.
I think so much of the hiring process, I think we forget what a long process it actually is. Mm-hmm. And there's so much to be said for how early you can possibly hold interviews and know who you've got, so that because inevitably once you've hired for a position, there's movement in other places for a lot of things too. So, now if you hire somebody to fill a position, maybe the classes that they're teaching may have changed. So now you've got to adjust things. So there's just so much that happens with scheduling and hiring that really can't be overstated how important it is to get that done quickly.
And I would agree with that. And I really think some shifts that need to be done with hiring is hiring for your district, not for your building. We need to be much more flexible in maintaining jobs. And so hiring for people that will be great for the district and kind of forecasting what some of those changes may be. And also, you much rather put the work in on the front end of hiring than what it takes on the back end to, I hate to say, just, terminate people, but really, if you don't do the work on the front end, the work on the back end is so much more and much more heartbreaking, and it's a lot more work. The work is just much different and harder. So look at it as you much rather do that up front and get the right people for your building and the district and who's going to be great for kids. You got to keep that in mind.
So let's talk evaluations and everything that comes with that. We are now at the end of, the last 6-8 weeks of school, 10 weeks of school, maybe depending on where you are. And you should be at this point finishing up your last round of observations if you haven't already. Right. So everything that comes along with that.
Right. So if you have gotten your observations in, and minus the few student tragedies that you have to, or bump in the roads you have to deal with, you are really looking at a lot of things now, because you have to wrap up your evaluations. You're going to be looking at their not only their instructional professional side, but you have to start looking at the student growth side. You have to get that final score in that final meeting. And in order to do all that, you also have to look at the IDPs and you have to look at the growth plans and start thinking, how do you want to plan for the final year? A lot has changed in the law. So it's not wait to the fall to start building this. You have to have that going on while you end a year. And again, like I said earlier, planning for the next. So it's really that's a lot of work on administrators, especially at the high school level. You have a larger staff, and it's split usually between the 3 or 5 of you. But elementaries, they're on their own. And those single principals are getting all the observations in. They have to do all the write-ups. They have to do all the review of the plans. And then they have to start building goals and looking into next year. A really important part of this is if you have staff that you think you're going to non-renew, they're just not the right person for your staff or district. That has to happen much, much earlier. And hopefully there's a conversation that's already been going on with your HR, and you already have that person on an IDP for improvement. You also want to look at folks that are on IDPs because they're probationary teachers or they're on one for improvement. Are they moving to the next level? Meaning, are they going on the tenure list, or have they hit their 4-year mark where they no longer need to be on an IDP? So there's lots of moving parts with the law when it comes to evaluation and who needs to be where and under which plans. And that can be daunting. That's a lot of really heavy record keeping, and hopefully your HR is helping you keep track of all of that as well.
So what about the probationary and tenure list? You talked about that. What about mentors?
So by law, you have to have a mentor for your first 3 years. And some districts might extend that. They might leave those in place for your probationary period, which is 5 now in the state of Michigan. But if probationary teachers are doing great and their 3 years have passed, some of them may make really good mentors themselves. Some of them, even though I've hired in the past people who are already tenured, and you can only be tenured once in Michigan, we would still give them a mentor for those new to the district things that they have to learn. So keeping an eye on that probationary tenure list is tricky because you have lots of different categories that people are moving in between, and they impact whether you're going to be on an IDP or a growth plan and where they are in the evaluation process. And now, if you are a school that's exercising your ability to put people on rotating years, if they have 3 consecutive highly effective years in a row, and you want to put them on a rotating and not evaluate them every year, you have to look at that too. And those need to be tenured folks.
How about school health and medication?
So there are a lot of real critical health issues in schools today. Some kids require an EpiPen, a diastat. We see diabetes earlier and earlier, and they require insulin. And all of those medications and strategies for kids and keeping them healthy while they're in school come into the school. And at the end of the year, they all need to go out. So it's really important that you communicate to parents early and let them know that medication pickup window is here, whatever that window is for you. So communicating through your website, listservs, Facebook, Twitter, getting that word out that medications need to be picked up. And then your policy for disposing of them. Because if they don't come and pick them up at the close of the school year, then you're required to dispose them appropriately. And you don't want parents coming back mad because they're expensive. Those diastats and EpiPens can be very, very expensive. So communication is important, and giving plenty of time for them to pick that up and make sure that they have it at home. And then it starts all over again the following year. You can't carry it over to the next year. And that's what people don't understand.
Recognition and celebrations. This is an exciting one.
So, that one, that's really, really important, I think, to wrap up. And this is more my principal hat than HR hat, but to have time with your staff and wrap up what went really well and what goals did you achieve as a school. That is really critical. And then also laying the foundation for the following year. What was a starting point? What did we start and finish? And what did we start and now we need to go into phase 2 or 3? Because a lot of things that education take on, MTSS is a good example. A lot of school districts are bringing that in to their school district, and they may be 1, 2, or 3 years into it, but it's a continual process that you have to nurture and train and carry that torch on. There's very little that start and stop in education. It's usually bringing it to the next level or the next step of learning and training. So, making sure that you celebrate that and lay the foundation for the following year and communicate what the expectations are during the summer.
Employee change forms.
So that is really important to the hiring, resigning, retiring, transferring. If there is not communication to human resources, and a lot of times districts will use the employee change form that either they have terminated and you fill that out and get it to HR, or they have transferred and you need to get that. The worst thing you want to happen in the fall is for people that are moving buildings or made a decision that their records are not updated by the following school year. That just shows that the district's not communicating with each other. It creates havoc that doesn't need to be in place. It's a simple form. But when you're scheduling and staffing and hiring and evaluating, that's an easy one to get lost in the shuffle. And that's usually when the dust settles, you can sit and fill out your forms and get those to human resources, and along with anything that is required to go in the personnel file. So, a lot of the evaluation goes in the personnel file, but other things go in the personnel file. And if they sit in the file in your building and they don't go to human resources, they don't really count. Those things need to be in the personnel file in order for them to be official part of their record. So if you had any discipline where you gave someone a written reprimand through the school year, that written reprimand needs to go to HR Central Office so that it goes in their personnel file. Otherwise, you don't have any record of it.
All right.
Lost in the shuffle a lot.
We're talking about employee change forms. Inevitably, there will be exit procedures
yes.
for our employees too. So let's talk about those.
So I like to encourage principals to do two different exit procedures. One exit procedure, and I call it more of a checkout procedure for those teachers that are intending to come back the next school year. So there is a lot to wrap up at the end of the school year, and make sure that everything is in your grades. Anything that I know it, when I was a principal, it was a 2-page list. So any materials that need to be returned, do you have a book depository? So you check your books in and out. Your grade books are collected. Anything that is something that needs to be done to button up the school year, that checklist should be clearly communicated to your staff and probably given out. I like to give it out like maybe 2 weeks before the end of the school year, so teachers know what to expect, and those things that they can check out of early, get that off their list, especially if you have a big staff of 100, 130 was my staff, that can get them moving. The other exit procedure, which I think gets overlooked a lot too, is people that are leaving through retirement, resignation, or transferring. You really need to have a thorough checkout process for them so that you collect keys, you collect all school materials that may have been tablets, whether it's a laptop or your iPods. That should be a checklist. And then you really should go through their classrooms and make sure that their classrooms are left in good condition. Now, we trust our teachers. We love them very much, and we think, that feels very not a nice way to send people off. It really is an important part. There's so much money in technology, and really you can make it fun. It can be a good conversation, and really what better way to say goodbye to someone than in their own workspace. So it doesn't have to be an uncomfortable situation, and they understand, they know, and really there should be an exit process in place for those folks that are leaving your building for good.
Communicating professional development or summer reading.
So that can be either a nice supplement to your checkout list, but you want to communicate building hours. A lot of teachers like to work during the summer. They like to reset. They love the fact they can come in when they want to come in. They like to change their rooms around and bulletin boards and all that good stuff. So being clear about what building hours are and how they're available to you, and then any professional development that's being offered throughout the summer, you want to get that out early so that they can take advantage of it. And some schools like to have reading clubs, like summer reading or books or supplemental reading that may lie that groundwork for the following year. While it doesn't need to be mandatory, it can be optional. The way our teachers are, they will make it mandatory to themselves. We have really good teachers in this state, and they will pick the book up or that reading, and maybe not in June, but getting in late July, maybe August. But we know our teachers work all year round.
That's right.
So being clear on what you can do during the summer hours, and then the biggest thing I think is important is when do they return? What is the date? What's the time? And what's the expectation of that location? Is it a PD day? Is it going to be a work in your classroom day? What is it? Because our teachers like to plan. And when there's emails going around and confusion, it doesn't set you up for the next school year very positively. So I like to really make sure that communication is strong. And then reminders throughout the summer as well.
So much of the end of the year stress could be alleviated if we gave more time ahead of it. Even if it's, if your end of the checkout list is ready by the 15th of May, give it to them on the 15th of May. The more we know as administrators, nobody likes surprises. And even though it's something that's coming up, why not give them the information ahead of time? Let them have it. And if it means you have to give it twice, then you give it twice. But at least they've got the information. They know what you're expecting. So there's nothing that's out of the ordinary. And the same thing with coming back. As soon as we know those dates, get them to them. Because if a teacher knows that they need a week to get their classroom prepared before they come back for professional development, and then they take a week and it ends up that the first day back is a work day anyway and they didn't know.
Right. That's frustrating.
It's very frustrating, and it should be. It's totally fair. So the more information that we can give them, the earlier the better, I think, is the absolute best way to communicate with our staff. Well, Carol, this is a phenomenal checklist, and I very much appreciate you having the conversation with us.
Absolutely.
That we can share this way so that so many of our members can listen, and maybe listen more than once if they need to, about all the things that have to go through. But I believe that this checklist will be on mymassp.com soon. Is that correct?
That's correct. I did a little bit of editing and I sent it to Colin, and he's going to work to get that up.
Great. So this will be another one of those fantastic MASSP checklists that you can print off or you can use digitally and check through all of your very, very important end of the year nitpicky details that must be done before we start next year. So thank you again for being here. And if any of the principals listening or assistant principals or aspiring principals want to get a hold of you, how can they contact you?
They can contact me through my email, which is kind of long. It's Baaki-Diglio, CBAAKIDIGLIO @gmail.com. And by all means, they can give me a call, which is 734-812-2501.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And
fun.
It is fun. It's a great conversation, and sharing material with principals is always a great time. So thank you again for sharing your knowledge with us, and look for another MASSP podcast coming soon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Theresa.